Proverbs 16:24 states, "Pleasant words are as a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and health to the bones." Hello and welcome to From Sickness to Health. I'm your host, Rico Hill, and I'm here with Blue Guy Sickness, and today's topic is woo-hoo! You all right?
Oh, man, I'm good, real good. Just drank 5 sodas, a tall glass of sweet tea, and I think I'm on a sugar high.
Wow, you know what? That's interesting because today's topic is sugar.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's great. I mean, real great. Because I love sugar, baby. Sugar donuts, sugar candy, sugar cookies. But man, when I wash it all down with a big gulp, 64 ounces of goodness, outstanding.
You should know that sugar happens to be the leading cause of many lifestyle diseases like diabetes, heart disease.
Well, did you know that I don't care?
Well, as you know, this is a health program where we use biblical principles and we go to the Bible for answers. So sit back and enjoy the program.
Wait a minute. Now, why do you think they say your kiss is so sweet?
I don't know.
Oh, baby, give me some sugar. I'll tell you why. Because sugar is good for you. And you know what? 2 particular kinds of sugar are good for you. Number 1, pure, refined white sugar. Number 2, high fructose corn syrup. Good stuff.
Good stuff, huh?
Good stuff.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
All right, let's roll the program.
Roll it!
Would you pass me the sugar? Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for joining us here in the studio From Sickness to Health. I'm your host, Rico Hill, and I'm joined by my good friend, Dr. Milton Mills, who is a critical care physician at the United Medical Center in Washington, D.C., but he's also the Associate Director of Preventative Medicine for the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So he is a health educator, and we appreciate that on this program. Today we're talking about sugar. You've heard a little bit about this in our segment just before we got started here in the studio. I welcome you here to the program to talk about sugar.
Glad
I'm passing it back to you. Thank you so much for being here with us, Doc. We're going to talk about sugar diabetes. We're going to talk about how this is affecting our communities, how it's affecting our health. But before we dive into our very, very serious topic on this subject, let us take a look at what our friend Sickness has to say about this subject. Sure. Let's take a look.
Here I am, coming out of my favorite supermarket. Got some of my favorite goods here. If it comes in a box, a can, or a bag, it's good for you. Now, some of the brands here are blurred out. The reason for that is to protect their excellent identity that the health nuts don't want you to know about. Here in cereal, we've got 21 grams of sugar in a box of cereal. And one of my favorites, in bread, a lot of people don't know there's sugar in bread. And last but not least, no one would ever imagine canned vegetables, sugar in a can. An excellent idea. Back to you, Rico.
Well, sugar is in everything, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
But here's the big question for us. Is it the culprit? Is it responsible for this thing which we've termed sugar diabetes?
Not necessarily, and not in and of itself. It certainly plays a role.
Okay.
But it is not the primary cause of the diabetes epidemic that we're seeing in the country today.
And it is an epidemic because they're saying that by the year 2020, something like half of us would be type 2 diabetic.
Absolutely. And that is for the population in general. The levels and prevalence of diabetes is actually much worse in communities of color. We see much higher rates in African American communities and Hispanic communities, and we also in Native American communities, and we also see that in Asian American communities, they tend to get diabetes at much lower body weights than other Americans if they're eating the typical Western diet.
So you don't necessarily have to have the obesity associated with diabetes in the Asian communities.
If you're eating the wrong food.
So it's really so what I'm hearing you say is that it's sort of coming down to the food again.
Absolutely.
All right, let's drill down on this. First of all, let's talk about what is diabetes. What are we talking? What's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes?
Okay, that's a very, very excellent question. Because type 1 diabetes, they're very, very different diseases. They used to be called juvenile onset. Type 1 used to be referred to as juvenile onset diabetes, and type 2 used to be referred to as adult onset diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. And what that means is that's a disease where the body's immune system attacks and destroys the cells in our pancreas that actually make insulin.
Is that the beta cells?
The beta cells, exactly. And the beta cells make insulin, and insulin is the hormone that tells all of the cells in the body to take up blood sugar to keep the blood sugar level within the normal range. Well, if the body destroys all of those beta cells, then there is no insulin in the body. The blood sugar level goes completely out of control, but more importantly, the body is unable to metabolize glucose, and that becomes a life-threatening condition.
That's type 1 diabetes.
That's type 1 diabetes.
So this is where the pancreas is not producing
Any insulin whatsoever.
at all. Okay.
And just to make a very important point, that can also be related to diet in this way. Studies have shown that if children are introduced to cow's milk before they are a year old, it will markedly, or significantly, I should say, increase their risk of going on to develop type 1 diabetes.
Cow's milk.
Cow's
We're
milk.
talking about the milk that many of us drink and give to our children at a very young age.
Absolutely.
Cow's milk in the
right.
store.
So the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that children not be introduced to cow's milk until they are more than 1 year of age. Personally, I would recommend that you not introduce it to them at all.
At all.
The best milk to feed your children, of course, is mom's breast milk.
Yes.
But certainly you should absolutely not give them cow's milk until they are more than a year old. But let's talk about the main culprit in this epidemic of diabetes.
Hold on, before we do that, let's hear what is type 2 diabetes.
That's what we're about to talk about.
Okay, good.
That is the so-called adult onset. And the reason we no longer refer to it as adult onset diabetes is because we're now seeing type 2 diabetes in children as young as 11 and 12 years of age because of the epidemic of pediatric obesity. And type 2 diabetes is related to something called insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance.
Right.
Okay.
And remember, in type 1 diabetes, the body is not making any insulin. Well, in type 2 diabetes, the body is making insulin. It's just that the cells no longer respond to insulin in a normal fashion. So the way I explain it to my patients, I tell them it's like the body becomes partially deaf to insulin. So what happens is, just like when we become deaf, people try to make us hear them in a couple of different ways. One, they try to shout at us or speak louder. So one of the things that the pancreas does is it starts to pump out more and more insulin. So the amount of insulin in our body tends to go up, and we end up with very high insulin levels. That tends to make people gain weight. It tends to make them accumulate fat. It can also raise your risk for a number of inflammatory conditions. And over time, it doesn't work as well.
So let me just make sure I'm clear. So the first way that the body or the pancreas may respond in this sort of deaf analogy that you're using is it will begin to speak louder. It's
Right.
going to make an extra added effort to try to communicate.
Right.
But hold on, I want to hear the other ways that that may happen. But let's take a look at a video, a news clip that may give us some insight that may corroborate what we're saying, because we like to hear
Sure.
from them as well. So let's take a look.
In this morning's Health Watch, the alarming rate of diabetes. A new study finds the number of adults around the world living with the disease has more than doubled in the past 30 years. Medical correspondent Dr. Jennifer Ashton has more on this epidemic for us this morning. Doc, good morning.
Good morning to you, Chris. In the U.S. alone, experts predict that more than half the adult population will be dealing with some form of diabetes by the year 2020. And while some cases are tied to family history, many more are tied to obesity and unhealthy lifestyle choices.
3 years ago, 32-year-old Gwen Seaton began feeling exhausted after almost every meal. When she went to her doctor, a routine blood test quickly diagnosed her problem as diabetes.
I was actually quite shocked when I got it as young as I did. Usually it's a later onset disease in my family.
Seaton was at high risk for diabetes because of her family history. Now she must follow strict dietary rules, take insulin injections, and test her blood sugar level up to 7 times a day, all to make sure her diabetes is kept under control.
It gets frustrating. It's a constant consideration. It's not impossible to deal with, but it is something that you always have to be mindful of.
A new study indicates that more people than ever before are now living with the debilitating disease. In 1980, an estimated 153 million people were living with diabetes. In 2010, that number more than doubled, jumping to 347 million.
You know, doctor, I really feel for this woman, because you see that she has to check her blood sugar 7 times a day.
Right.
That's pricking herself 7 times a day. This is not a pleasant experience, is it?
No, it's not.
And I would even add that she is not your typical profile for someone who is type 2 diabetic. Now, in that little clip we saw, they said it's because of her family genetics.
Right, right. Absolutely, that it's very clear that certain people have a genetic predisposition to type 2 diabetes. Now, does that mean that if several family members of yours have a history of diabetes, that you are bound to get it? No. Depending on the lifestyle choices you make, you can make choices that will make it less likely that you will go on to develop diabetes.
Something we always say on this program, we say, you know, genetics loads the gun, but your lifestyle pulls the trigger. And I think that they have a science now that's called epigenetics.
Sure.
How the genes will express themselves is how you basically live your lifestyle. And we heard some of that in that clip.
Right.
But before we went over to the clip, you were breaking down that the pancreas and the insulin will begin to, or the pancreas will release the insulin, but it will be shouting, trying to get to communicate to the cells.
Sure.
But you had some other ones, and I had to cut you off.
Well,
there.
let me just give you one quick little analogy that I always give to my patients, because I hear this a lot. They say, well, you know, my grandmother had diabetes, my parents have it, my brother has it, I'm going to get it. And I tell them, you know what? Having lungs means that you are genetically predisposed to drowning, but only if you get into water over your head. And likewise, you may have a genetic predisposition to diabetes, but only if you are in a high-risk environment, by which I mean if you're eating the type of diet that will predispose you to developing that diabetes. And what are those risk factors? It's a diet that's high in fat, low in fiber, high in animal protein, and processed carbohydrates. And we can talk about what those things are. There are other factors that play a role: smoking, a lack of exercise, and of course, gaining excess weight.
Okay, so and you have some. I want you to walk us through. We have some slides and things like that that we're going to talk about. But I wanted to. I was really caught up on the first way it's going to do it. It's going to yell to the cells, open up so that we can insert some glucose. What other ways will the insulin try to communicate to the cells?
Well, I mean, basically what happens is the pancreas continues to pump out more and more insulin, but eventually that simply becomes ineffective. The cells become so resistant to that insulin, it just stops working effectively. And then at that point, the person's blood sugar rises out of the normal range, and they have frank diabetes. And so that's the point at which people begin to notice that they are thirsty a lot, that they are
excessive
peeing
urination.
a lot. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that they may
Excessive
have
hunger.
Right, or infections or wounds that won't heal, and they go to the doctor, or like the lady in the clip, she's tired all the time. They go to the doctor, they measure their blood sugar, and they find, oh my goodness, my blood sugar is 300. And they're diagnosed with diabetes, and they have to go on medication. And if the diabetes is mild, they may go on oral medications, which will stimulate the pancreas to release even more insulin, which will bring the blood sugar down. But if nothing is done to change the diet and lifestyle, that's eventually going to become ineffective in and of itself.
And then what do they have to do?
Well, then they will, again, if they don't change their diet and lifestyle, they're eventually going to end up injecting insulin, because it becomes kind of a vicious cycle. Because the problem is that they're not treating the underlying disease, which is the lifestyle that is creating the insulin resistance.
Okay, now right here, you're listening at home and you're saying, wait a minute, that's me. I'm either taking the oral medication or I'm taking the daily injections of insulin. And I'm trying to regulate, but it's not getting any better. Is this thing reversible? Now, we started out the program sort of tongue-in-cheek with the passing of some sugar, because most people believe that, if my issue is due to not anything other than I've had a lot of pies, I've had a lot of cookies and cakes and things that are just replete with sugar, but that's really not the whole truth, is it?
No, it is not.
We want to really give people the practical understanding of what's really behind this culprit. What's really happening here when people are having to regulate their blood sugar with all these medications that really don't help them ultimately, don't reverse the disease. Let's share that with the audience.
Okay. Well, let's just focus in on African Americans.
Okay.
If you look at the prevalence of diabetes and prediabetes in the African American communities, it is very, very high.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at the prevalence in West Africa, it's very, very low. The genetic background of those populations is the same, because we know African Americans were drawn from West Africa.
Sure.
What's different? It's the diet. Traditional West African diets are low in fat, they're plant-based, they contain no dairy, and very small amounts of meat.
Let's break that down for people. So we're talking about it's low fat, so there's not a lot of animal saturated fat, flesh foods.
Correct.
It's plant-based, so we're talking about
very high in fiber. Lots of grains, lots of green leafy vegetables, lots of beans. Yes, absolutely.
And fruits and things
fruits
like that.
And fruits and vegetables.
Okay.
Yes, and no dairy foods.
So, and when we say dairy, we're talking about milk. We're
Right.
talking about cheese.
Exactly.
We're talking about even the beloved ice cream, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Butter, all those things come under the dairy category. Continue.
Yes, and as I said, low in meat. They don't eat a lot of beef and pork and chicken, and they have very small amounts of meat.
If they do eat some, it's very. It's not the main staple.
Exactly, they're small amounts. They're eating primarily the beans, the grains, and the green leafy plant foods, or root vegetables like yams and so forth.
Okay.
And as a result, very low rates of diabetes. But when they move to, say, Europe or
America,
transfer to America, adopt a more Western-style lifestyle, their rates of diabetes climb and become equal to ours.
Okay, so that tells me it's the food that they are consuming once they come here.
Right, it's not the genetics.
Doc, a lot of people don't know that it's more than genetics. So, and clearly this is demonstrated in what people are saying, and we always like to hear what they're saying. So let's take a look real quick before we bring in some graphs and some slides to really prove this point. Let's hear what Sickness found out on the street.
Sure.
I'm here with Damien today in this awfully sunny place. And my friend Damien here, I want to ask you some questions. What do you think of sugar?
It's bad for you.
Don't you think sugar would be insulted right now?
Totally.
Stevie, what do you think of sugar?
It's yummy.
It's yummy. Boy, these are words I like to hear. What types of ways do you like to eat your sugar?
On toast, on anything, really.
I love these people. Now, you notice that accent. It's from Australia, right? Oh, man. How do you feel after you eat sugar?
Shaky.
Shaky, like in a good way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Lots of energy.
Yeah.
Just want to tackle the day with all that energy.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I love these people from down under. Lots of sugar. Lots of love. You don't eat
But
any sugar?
I do. It depends if it's organic or not.
Organic. Oh, man. You sound like those vegetarians. What do you think of sugar?
Gotta have it.
Gotta have it. I already like this one.
I love it.
Love it?
Love it.
Would you say you love it too?
Yeah.
We love sugar! How do you like to eat your sugar?
I like to eat it with coffee on my cereal in the morning.
These refined people love sugar. Need I say more? Back to you, Rico. Anybody know of a place to get a donut? Down the street. Down the street.
Again, you know, as you can see, people think it's popsicles, they think it's sodas, they think it's, you know, just the sugary things. But the picture is much broader than that, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's more than just refined sugars and carbohydrates. One of the biggest factors is dietary fat, as this slide here shows.
Let's take a look at that.
This is a slide showing 3 different blood sugar profiles in one subject as a result of 3 diets with differing levels of fat. The red is a high-fat diet, the yellow is an intermediate fat diet, and the green is a low-fat diet. And in the red, you have high-fat, low-carb. In the green, you have high-carb, low-fat. And what you see is that on the high-fat diet, you have very poor blood sugar control. The blood sugar spikes to extremely high levels, stays high for an extended period of time, and then slowly comes down. Whereas on the high-carb, low-fat diet, you have a much more favorable blood sugar profile where the blood sugar level rises only to a modest degree and then stays in a relatively constant range for an extended period of time. And that's exactly what you want. Because when you eat a meal, you want that energy level to come into your body in a controlled fashion so you have the energy to exercise and do your activities of daily living.
Sure, yeah.
And do what you need to do. So what we know is that dietary fat interferes with the ability of insulin to do its job. And that's one of the primary problems with the Western diet. It's extremely high in fat, and that's what causes a lot of insulin resistance. But other factors that contribute to insulin resistance are not only the amount of fat that we eat, but animal protein. Animal protein increases insulin resistance. So the more animal protein you eat, and that could be beef, chicken, pork, shellfish, you name it, that's going to also increase your insulin resistance.
Why does I say I want to understand that? I want our audience to understand that insulin resistance. Are we talking about the amount of fat? I've heard it referred to as like bathing the cells in fat, coating the outside of the cell to the extent that the receptors to receive that insulin that unlocks the cell to put in the glucose, it's bathed in a fat and grease, or is it fat that's on the inside, or is it both?
Well, I guess you could think of it as sort of coating the cell in these fatty molecules that don't allow the receptors to work properly. Quite frankly, we don't know all of the molecular mechanisms by which fat interferes with insulin's activity. We just know that it, in fact, does occur. We don't know all of the precise molecular mechanisms by which animal protein interferes with insulin's activity. but we know that it occurs. We know that when people switch from animal proteins to plant proteins, their blood sugar profiles improve dramatically. Other factors that improve decrease insulin resistance are eliminating dairy foods from the diet, stopping smoking, and also, of course, increasing the amount of fiber in the diet. And fiber actually does this in a number of ways. One, it increases satiety so that you tend to eat less.
You feel full.
Right, you feel full. Delays the emptying of the stomach so that food is released into the small intestine in a more controlled fashion. But the other thing is that when the fiber gets to your large intestine, it's broken down by the bacteria into compounds called short-chain fatty acids that go to the liver and stop the liver from making glucose.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. So someone's watching and they're saying, I'm a type 2 diabetic.
Yes.
Okay, I've heard all the information. It sounds great. But what I want to know is, can I reverse it?
Yeah.
Can I get off this medication? Now, we don't suggest anybody get off any kind of medication without consulting your physician. But people are wondering, can I turn this around, and how long would it take?
Yes.
Real quick, because we're running out of time.
Sure. There is no question that you can reverse diabetes. I've done it with my patients. That if a patient is willing to make the kinds of changes it takes to get off these medicines, yes, you can reverse diabetes. I've had patients who become vegan, vegetarians, and they were able to get off all of their medicines. I had a patient, I won't give out her name because that's not appropriate. She was on insulin twice a day plus oral tablets. She became a vegan vegetarian over the course of about 45 days, took her off all of her diabetic medication plus 2 of her 3 blood pressure medicines. The claudication in her legs cleared up. Her heart grew new blood vessels. She became a new woman. She was able to go back to work.
All I can say is amen to that, and I know you're saying amen too. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being with us today. This has been great information. I hope you'll take it to heart and you'll make the changes necessary. Live healthy. Thank you so much, Doctor.
My pleasure.
May God bless you and God bless you. Look, who doesn't love sugar? I still love my sweets. You don't believe me? You try to take my cookie from me. You'll see. All I'm saying is, in this show, we have learned that there are healthier alternatives, healthier sugars that you can use. White refined sugar is toxic to the system and lead to lifestyle diseases like diabetes, cancer, and heart disease. So,
cut! Look, I've had enough. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. Sugar is an amazing source of sickness.
Yeah.
It's because it tastes so good on everything. So you know what? Good luck getting people to stop using it.
Well, guess what? We don't want to stop anybody from enjoying their sweets. That's why we began this program with a biblical principle that states that the honeycomb is sweet to the soul. That's a sugar.
Yeah, okay.
So you enjoy your sweets. All we're saying is enjoy them in a healthier way. That's our program today. I'm Rico Hill, your host, and this is
Sickness, the Blue Guy.
And as always, I'd like to just say to you, 3 John 2 says, Beloved, I wish above all things that thou mayest prosper and be in health. Stay healthy. Maranatha.
Hello, ladies. Would you like some white sugar? White sugar? Oh, okay. Want some white sugar? White sugar? Hi, ma'am. Would you like some white sugar?
Sugar? Why are you passing out sugar?
Because everyone...
I have diabetes. My mom has diabetes. Why would you... Hey, come back here. I'm going to get you. Hey,